What's up, everybody? Still, same thing as yesterday. But in this video, we got to break down an exciting topic where we're talking about the best agents, the agent tier list, and we're going to be doing this based on pro play so that we know exactly what characters are dominant right now and what characters you should be playing and what characters you should probably avoid. So let's break it all down. Now, in order to get all this data, we're using the top 8 teams of the recent Challengers event in NA so that we know from the top down what is the most competitive when played optimally, and then we're going to talk about how that should affect your picks in your games. Now, kicking it off with the first agent on the list, we have Silva at an 86% pick rate, the highest played agent in the entire game right now, with 100% pick rate on Haven, Icebox, Ascent, and Bind, a 67% pick rate on Breeze, and a fat 0% pick rate on Split. Basically, Silva just does it all. He helps your duelist entry, he plays extremely well post-plant, he can contest spikes, play for retakes, gather info, has a very powerful ultimate. His utility, his recon utility, is what's going to decide a lot of the engagements and how engagements go. My number one tip for you in this meta is to make sure that you are keeping track of the Silva's recon cooldown, because that's when a rehit is going to happen. 40 seconds from the point that the first recon goes out, the next one will go out. And whether that means the enemy rotated off and is going to hit another site, or they're going to rehit a site, you can be prepared for it if you track the time. Not that difficult to do, but very important, because you can adopt your play, you can peek, you can gather information, or brace yourself right before this engagement happens so you're not caught off guard. Now, the next most picked character in the entire game is Jett at a 71% pick rate, with Haven, Icebox, Ascent, Split, and Breeze seeing a lot of pick rate, but nothing on Bind. This is like the inverse of Raze, with Raze only having a 36% pick rate, but having a maxed out pick rate on Bind. So they swap a little bit here, but they do have giant amounts of overlap on Split, so you can play both characters there. Now, Jett is going to be a phenomenal character in ranked, pretty much no matter what the scenario is, if you got the skills to back her up. But we gotta move on to the next character on the list. In third place, Viper at a 51% pick rate. No play on Haven or Ascent, but a lot of play on Icebox, Bind, Breeze, and a little bit of pick rate on Split. Now, Viper's one of those characters that how much impact you can get on her is going to be directly proportional to the amount of work you put in outside of games learning these rollouts. Because the more rollouts you know, the better you can contest from further away, the more you're going to be able to do on Viper. Now, of course, that's not the only thing that you need to work on. Your gunplay, understanding the character, how to play around your ult, and of course, your toxic screen lineups. These are all very important as well, but there's a lot to learn on Viper, and I think for those of you who would rather focus on the ability side of it, and you're someone who's a student of the game, then Viper just might be the best character for you. I would suggest either Viper or Silva. Now, the next character we got to talk about is Omen at a 44% pick rate, seeing quite a bit of play on Haven, decent pick rate on Icebox, Ascent, and Bind, not that great on Split, and okay on Breeze. Now, basically, the controller category is actually pretty balanced besides Brimstone that we'll get to in a little bit, where they're basically just fighting for place. When Haven is not a traditional Viper map, Omen picks up that slack. When Ascent is not that great for Viper or Omen, Astra picks up that slack, and that's just going to be a theme that you see throughout this. So it really is learning your character or changing your character to fit the optimal map. Honestly, if you're a controller player, a dead set controller player, if you could learn how to play multiple different controllers, that might be the best way to go about it. But you could also climb just one tricking a controller as well. Just because it's not played that much in pro play on a certain map doesn't mean you can't get a lot of value as that agent on that map, especially if you practice a little bit on it, especially for specifically characters like Viper that take a little bit of pre-knowledge before you go in. Now, we're skipping over that Raze because we already talked about her at a 36% pick rate, going to Sage also at a 36% pick rate with 0 play on Haven, quite a bit on Icebox, mid on Ascent, decent on Bind, a lot on Split, and a little bit on Breeze. Now, Sage is in a really interesting spot, especially in ranked, because her ranked win rate is pretty high. That being said, in pro play, Sage is really only optimal or perfectly optimal on Icebox and Split, with maybe an argument to be made for Ascent. Even after her nerf, she's looking in a pretty healthy spot, and I think that she's a perfect character to play in your ranked games, but something that I would highly suggest you learn how to do is pivot from being a passive Sage to an aggressive one. sometimes you have to take on a more aggressive lurking role, and you can get a lot of value by being kind of a pseudo-aggressive sage where you pick and choose these really value lurks, but then you go back and play safe the majority of the time, so you're not inting and dying and feeding, but every once in a while you make these pretty big plays or you get a kill and then scurry away. Real quick, the only way to support the channel and gain a fat 3 inches in height, it's smashing that like and subscribe and going to the GameLeap website. But let's get back into the content. Now, the next character that we got to talk about is Cypher at a 35% pick rate, actually beating Killjoy at a 28% pick rate. Now, Cypher is seeing a ton of play on Haven, a ton of play on Split, but for Icebox, Ascent, Bind, and Breeze, he's seeing very little play. Now, if you look at Killjoy, she's seeing a ton of play on Ascent and a ton of play on Breeze. So you can kind of see how these characters are kind of occupying each other's lack of spaces. But there are some maps, specifically a map like Icebox, where neither of them see play because Sage is picking up that slack, Viper is seeing a lot of play, Jet, Silva, and you kind of see that there's not a lot of room for those characters, especially when you're considering that even Reyna sees quite a bit of play on Icebox as well, and they would rather have those characters rather than stalling Sentinels on such a different type of map than many of the other maps. Now, this is kind of the same situation with Controller, where both Cypher and Killjoy are going to have strengths and weaknesses on different maps, but you could definitely make one of them work in ranked. However, it might be in your best interest to learn both characters so that you can fully encapsulate the role, and then you can play most optimally playing Cypher on that Haven, rocking that Killjoy on that Ascent. I think this is actually a pretty good way to go about it because you're more adaptable for the changes in future metas. If a character gets buffed or a character gets nerfed, plus if you ever want to scrim, you're going to be able to fully fill that role and not have like an overwhelming personal preference. But that's really a personal decision that's going to be 100% up to you. Now, next up, we do got to talk about Astra. We briefly mentioned her. She actually sees quite a bit of play on Ascent, Split, decent on Bind, decent on Haven, no play on Icebox, and no play on Breeze. She's definitely a character that wants to be able to get value out of a choke or a choke funnel. And you got to think about all these maps where there is a choke. Ascent, there's chokes. Bind, of course there's chokes. Haven, there's chokes for sure. Split, there's like only choke. But if you think about Icebox and Breeze, there's not. It's way too open. It's way too wide. There's no possible way that you're going to get a big suck off. There's no possible way you're going to be able to get value out of your concussion. And it just makes sense that you wouldn't want to be playing the character in those situations. Now, next character we got to talk about is actually Skye, 31% pick rate with a 45% on Haven, pretty decent. No pick rate on Icebox, decent in the 30s in Ascent, Bind, and Split, and then a whopping 83% on Breeze. Now, of course, Breeze is going to be Skye's playground. You're going to be able to get tons of information. In fact, a lot of the pro players were playing both Skye and Silva on Breeze so that they have that double dipping info. The map is so wide, you want to be able to gather info all over the place, and Skye is just amazing for retake. Now, I do think that Skye can be a difficult character to master, but is definitely rewarding for pulling it off, and her pick rate is only increasing every single time we look at one of these tier lists. She's seeing more and more pick rate. In Korea, she's seeing even more pick rate than in NA. So I definitely wouldn't sleep on this character, even if maybe on Icebox she's at her least optimal. The next up, we got to talk about Reyna, who's seeing no play at Haven, about 50% on Icebox, 30 on Ascent, a little bit on Bind and Split, and then about 30% on Breeze. Now, while she's not the most dominant character in ranked, it's going to be a completely different story where Reyna just reigns supreme, because if you have the aim, which is the #1 reason that you're probably stuck in your rank, is because your aim. If your aim is better than people, Reyna can directly turn that into rank up, right? That's pretty much the simplest way to explain it. Now, from a high-end perspective, from the top looking down, Reyna's actually really good on maps like Icebox if you have someone who is really mechanically gifted on your team and you can really use them to harass the enemy, get these value picks, and get out in a way that no other character can. But typically, she's going to be used in conjunction with a character like Jet, not as a replacement. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, let's talk about the bottom of the barrel characters. First, Phoenix, which Phoenix still has a 50% on Ascent and Haven. Not too bad, even if he saw no other pick rate on any of the other maps. Phoenix is really a character that, unfortunately, while he does do a lot of different things, he does those things the weakest. He's like a jack of all trades, master of none. But really, when you're playing in a pro environment, you want masters that are working together, right? You want the most powerful abilities at your disposal, not a character that has a smattering of different, like, weakened abilities kind of put into one. But that does make him perfect for ranked. And I do think that Phoenix is actually probably A tier when it's talking about just a pure ranked tier list. But if we're talking about a pro pick rate tier list, he's all the way down towards the bottom, even if he's really a legitimately good character that can climb you all the way to Immortal and beyond. Now, let's talk about the bottom 3 characters that basically didn't see any pick rate out of these top 8 NA teams: Yoru, Brimstone, Breach. Now, we talked about Yoru a lot, getting a rework soon. We already know that. I wouldn't really suggest playing him unless you're just really, like, you love the character for some reason. He's going to be completely different. We don't know how different he's going to be. I would just wait until then. Now, Brimstone, while I do think that he's okay in ranked because his smokes last a really long time, he's relatively easy to fill to. I don't really think that if you are a controller main, you should be spending all your time on Brimstone. Brimstone's a character that is a lot easier to master than the other controllers, which makes him kind of perfect for you filling. Like if you're a duelist or an initiator or something and you want to fill to a controller, probably Brimstone's your best bet because you can still do the job without like knowing that much about lineups and how to play the character and how to lurk or things like that. You could just play a passive controller and you could do the job. But if you're a controller main, there's so much more that you want to practice and learn and get reps through on Astra, on Viper, and even Omen versus Brimstone. And Brimstone, when played perfectly optimally, is not going to reach those characters' impact level according to the pro pick rate. So I would just probably not play him right now unless you're just filling. Now, Breach is surprising with a 0% pick rate. Even in pro play, that is bad. That is very, very bad for the character. This means that you should probably just be not playing him in ranked, because Breach has always been a character that is much better in pro play with that coordination and people following you up and following your abilities up than playing him in ranked where you don't get any of those things guaranteed. And if he's not seeing any play, and I mean absolutely any play in the pro top 8 teams, then you should just not be playing him in ranked. It looks like he is incredibly underpowered, but really the full story in my opinion is that Skye does everything that Breach can do, but she just does it better. So if you're ever gonna play a Breach, you would just want your flashes to be able to give you info as well, because you're pop flashing the Skybirds is the exact same thing. Her ultimate is probably a little bit worse, but the rest of her abilities are better. She can duel better, pop flash better. I mean, yeah, Skye, just gathering that information, it's just going to be a better pick for you, honestly. Sorry, you Breach mains, but he's not looking that great. Now, I know what some of you might be like, wait, you're missing a character. KO just came out. Where the hell is he? Well, he's actually not included because he's not played yet. We do not have definitive data for KO yet, and he's probably going to mix up this pick rate slightly. Now, I don't think he's going to have a huge splash. I think he's going to be somewhere in that middle area where he's going to get 30% pick rate, but you got to understand that if he fights other characters for their pick rate, they could drop off. Now, who do I think he's directly challenging for their spot? I think that Silva is probably a character that he is challenging a little bit. Not that much. Silva is kind of irreplaceable, but KO could do similar things, being able to gather ability through the walls. I think that Skye might be in contention for taking some of her value away with KO. But honestly, the characters I would really look at are some of the duelists, like Phoenix, like Reyna, maybe even Raze, maybe even Jet. And the reason I say that is because KO can bolster a team's attack in a way that you don't need a giant amount of duelists. Maybe only one duelist on a team, maybe not any. And I think that I would imagine KO eating into some duelist pick rate, as well as the information gathering initiators like Skye and like Silva. But we'll definitely know the full picture pretty soon in the next couple of events. So definitely let me know in the comments down below if you want me to cover those. And go to the GameLeap website for in-depth advanced guides and VOD reviews over all these agents. If you really want to master them and improve, you got to go check it out right now. I really hope you enjoy the video. Thank you so much. I love your faces, and I'll see y'all next time.